Salaam Alaykum. And we're talking about truth. How do you know when something is true? Is there anything that's really, truly true? Why do some people want things in black and white so that something is either true or false? Absolutely. Are there absolutes? It's open question.
It's funny when you said about trusting the mentor, because it reminds me of why did I decide back in 2003, which was not long after September 11, why did I decide to become a Muslim at that point? It was such a weird time to decide to become a Muslim. And all I can remember is your sneakers. It was this really important moment where I realized that you didn't take yourself too seriously. And that's what was the thing that made me at least, start looking into trusting this person. It was like the sense of humor, the inspiration that you seem to have, like the love of Allah that you seem to have, and the excitement about it. There was a lot of energy, there, and then the fact that there was also humility, and I was like, those were the things that I kind of connected to at first, that I could see as something I could relate to. So I guess those things connected with things that I had already experienced as having connection to the truth, like humor, humility, and passion. But you know what? Like, people can have those things or appear to have those things and still be not trustworthy. So it's interesting. Like, I don't know how. I think it's also time and place. Like, would that same thing have attracted me or convinced me 10 years earlier or 10 years later? I'm not sure. Like, that was that time and place.
Kind of readiness. Like,
yeah.
Yeah.
And I was actively looking as well. It wasn't like it just sort of someone stopped me in the street and said, "Hey, do you want to be a Sufi?" So there's a part where, so some of those ideas, the Sufi ideas, I'd already connected with. So I knew what a Sufi was, and I knew the kinds of ideas that went along with Sufism and the kinds of practices. So it wasn't wholly foreign to me at that point.
So there was a pre-baking going on.
Yes. I was just going to say that one of the things that shocked me a bit about that book was how similar her journey and my journey were into this sort of foreign territory, but that she had gone that way and I had gone that way within that, because she could have become Muslim, met some Sufis and decided to go that way, but she met a lot of Salafis and Wahhabis and decided to go that way.
Ah. Okay, so there's a kind of rawness when in the seeking, where many directions can happen at the same moment, and depending on who's the guide at that time brings you into that element or space of thinking. But I know for me, it was kind of the opposite, where I was definitely seeking Sufism. I'd read Idris Shah's book on the Sufis, and I said, yeah, this sounds good. This is what I'd like. I would like to meet somebody like that. And it took me 20 years of looking before I found my sheikh, and I had to ask him, why has this taken so long? I knew what I wanted, but I met all these other teachers and all these different people talking about it, but you're the only one who holds the whole thing. Why? Why did I have to go through all that? And he said to me, how can you know the difference between the false and the true? Now you know one looks like and you know what the other looks like. So it became clear to you. And in thinking about that, that's, I guess, another thing, just the same with trust, that it requires time and experience to evolve into some kind of understanding of it, whether somebody, how much trust you can have in someone as a guide or a mentor.
Yeah, and like, what are you trusting this person to do? Like, you know, just because if you want to trust someone to be a sheikh, they're not necessarily going to be, you know, a pharmacologist or a engineer or a historian as well. Do you know what I mean? Like, if you want to become a really good historian, you pick someone who's a good historian as your mentor. But if you want to get close to Allah, you pick someone who's a specialist in that.
Question that I have is what is the spectrum of trustworthiness? How do we manage that? I mean, for somebody to enter, like, becoming radical, what makes them turn against all the other stuff that they've learned already and the experiences that they've had to take on this completely foreign?
So I don't know much about the other famous, you know, fundamental radical Islamists, but this one, she had a very harsh, traumatic childhood.
Uh-huh.
So I think someone who was looking for certainty because they hadn't had any growing up, you know, I think there's like an attachment problem there, or a, you know, lack of love, lack of stability, means that people are looking for something, you know, they don't have any internal discipline or structure, so they need it imposed, or something that they can follow that's like very delineated.
Well, I can certainly see that in the case of fear of abandonment.
Yeah. Or just fear of like chaos, I think.
Or abuse, yeah.
If you're brought up in a chaotic environment, then you're seeking out order, you know, and certainty.
Is there certainty in this life?
I think there is, but I think it's a lived experiential thing. I don't think it's something you can codify. Because what it is, I mean, there are things that tend to be true. It's usually a bad idea to go around murdering people. That's pretty certain about that. In general, you know, usually a bad idea to go around lying all the time. It's usually a bad idea, you know, to gobble up all the resources and not think about the future. Like, there's some things that are pretty reliably the case, but there's always exceptions to those.
And sometimes I think those, you know, the 10 Commandments could use an update. For example, thou shalt not destroy that which is sustainable.
Well, I mean, the thing is, like, if you look at not the 10 Commandments, but like the Catholic 7 deadly sins, gluttony and greed are always in there. Like, people always knew that that's a bad idea, but somehow we convince ourselves that what I'm doing is not that bad thing, it's different, you know. But in general, certainty is tricky, like, because you could base it on your feelings, but your feelings change. You can base it on ideas, but ideas change.
And understandings change.
Understanding changes. The physical world changes. Like, everything in this world changes.
That's a certainty.
Time. Or is it?
Well, as regards matter, anything that's matter is going to change. That is certain.
But when I was a kid, what I expected to change, a lot of it hasn't changed. And what I didn't expect to change has changed. And that's been interesting.
Hmm.
But yeah, like things always change. So it's like if you say, this land that I live on, that's the truth. Like a lot of the indigenous people do. And then someone comes along and does something to your land, then your anchor to the truth is gone.
Well, land is always changing. It's being subducted into the current tectonic plate, and that which was like 10 to 20 million years ago may not be around anymore because it's now part of the molten core.
Yeah. But I guess on human scales, it tends to
Yeah,
stick around. It looks permanent.
seems that way.
Seems
Yeah.
permanent.
But certainty and truth can become crutches and also little boxes to put ourselves in.
Do you think it's one of the reasons why young people tend to fall for extremism more often than old people is that young people they don't have the experience of different situations where they've had to like make these exception choices. When I was a kid, I was taught, abortion is wrong, full stop. It was easy to believe that because I hadn't been, for example, married to someone who had to get rid of a kid because they'd been raped. Like there's these kind of experiences that teach you from a personal point of view, that teach you that those rules, those black and white rules, are overly simplistic.
The idea of having enough time to be able to compare and experience other ways of looking at things is what happens over time.
Mm.
I'm just interpreting what you're saying.
Yeah. It's like Sheikh Chen said to you, like you need time to distinguish, what's true and false. But you can only do that by living through it and experiencing these things and going, oh, hang on. In my head, this was true, but now that I've lived through this experience, I have a different perspective.
It's the same with travel and seeing other cultures. And one of the things that's really remarkable is that we can do that with books. That books actually help us see from other people's points of view and have conflicting ideas with ourselves, which is a great way to experience a larger world. And I think with the current state of reading, that people are losing the ability to experience other points of view, and therefore that's one of the things that's happening with this polarity around the world, it seems. Because if you can't experience and appreciate how other people see things, then all you think is like, my way is the right way, which is a very egotistical, conceited, and minimalistic way of seeing how life is. And many people these days don't read. I don't know about books on, Audible and all that stuff, whether that works or not.
This is true. Equally, like I used to read a lot, and I still do read a lot. And I kept getting my experience has been kind of continually blindsided by not having actually been, everything being theoretical and abstract. Not even abstract, but like in your mind, everything is easy. Everything is it's quick. You can imagine something, it's there. When you try to bring that into the real world, into the physical world, appreciating just how difficult that is.
Yeah.
It makes you a lot more humble. Like I used to, just simple things like before I moved up here, I was like, oh, why doesn't everybody just use electric everything instead of these, two-stroke things that make lots of noise and pollution. And then tried to use an electric chainsaw, an electric whippersniffer, an electric mower on these things that were too big for them, and just realized like sometimes you just need a bit more power, and to do things that are actually helpful for your environmental management, you sometimes need to burn a bit of petrol. And it's that same sort of uncompromising, that the experience teaches you where things sometimes need to compromise for the bigger picture.
Yeah, but in the big picture too, not to argue, but what comes to mind is right tool for the right job.
Exactly. No, that's what I mean. But like,
oh, that's a concept, but then
because
this is the reality.
I was in an ideological space that hadn't been tested against the needs of like the real world.
Okay, ideology against experience, not against, but as opposed to experience. Yes. So there's a concept that can be planted, but to be able to use it, you actually have to get your hands on it and see how it actually works. Okay. So does that apply to truth and trust? For me, trust is a spectrum, including its opposite of untrust, that you can untrust or trust somebody to not trust them. Or there's elements of like, I can trust this section here of this person, but not the whole thing. Probably the same with truth.
I think that trusting is definitely an experience-based thing. It's like you extrapolate based on your past interactions with people. I can trust this person because they were trustworthy this time and this time and this time in this way to be able to do this. I can trust this person to fix an engine because they've fixed engines before. I can trust this person to keep a secret because they've kept secrets in the past. But if they haven't kept secrets in the past or they've made mistakes on engines, you wouldn't trust them.
Or, yeah, you can trust them not to trust them.
But if you meet someone new, often you don't know whether to trust them or not.
Right.
Until you get to know them better. Because you don't have any past experience.
That's why I think it's helpful to have your own way of testing the water, as it were. Problem that I find in, let's call it from the counseling point of view, is people have expectations about other people, and these expectations really kind of center around, well, they're going to change. And if I say the right thing or do the right thing, they're going to change properly. And this hardly ever comes about. I think this is where religion or any kind of cult runs into problems of thinking we have the right way, we know the truth, we know what's right, and you should be with us. And if you're not, you are unforgiven, or you are not saved, or you are fill in the blank. Makes things easy. It's kind of like knowing who the enemy is. There's us, and then there's them. That really clarifies everything. If I know who the enemy is, then I know who I am. I'm us. And you're them.
But you were them. You us.
I was, but now I know the truth.
So now you're us.
Now I'm us. Yeah. Very simple way of looking at things. And that's probably how I'm just trying to get into that mindset of like the black and white that you were talking about it, how you see, how can you see the world that way, or why you would want to see the world that way. And
it's definitely like sort of that, easy security. Like when I'm in this world, everything makes sense and therefore everybody else needs to be the same so that I feel secure. Because if
Security.
other people are different, then that's a threat.
So if you're not like me, you're a threat.
Mm. It's interesting though, like when I was reading, I remember this back with NASA as well, although he obviously never was this extreme, but I remember thinking, I agree with a lot of your questions and criticisms of about Western culture or the way things are, but I don't agree with your solutions. So I think like with someone like Osama bin Laden, he was very upset about the individuality in Western culture, about individuality and excesses, like personal excesses. And I'm like, yeah, that is a problem in Western culture. That's true. But the solution isn't to kill innocent people. It's like, how does that actually fix the problem that you're concerned about? And like this lady was very concerned with the way women were treated in Western culture as well, and objectified. But then she subjected herself to a patriarchal culture, which was the opposite, but still in a lot of ways oppressive or again simplistic. Well, if we don't ever look at women and we don't ever touch a woman, we're never in the same place as a woman, then no woman can ever be sexually assaulted, so they're safe. They can't have jobs, they can't go into business, they can't do all these, they have to stay at home and be prisoners because that way they're safe. It's like, yeah, it's true, but is that the best solution to that problem? Like it's like uncreative thinking, I guess. It's not opening up to possibilities and thinking through what's the best way to deal with this, or what are other sort of ways that we could solve these problems.
So what I'm hearing behind that is there are different ways to think. And one way is this linear binary way, which is there's either good or bad, right or wrong. And then there's a lateral way of like, well, some of this and some of that.
Maybe I think because it's hard. The danger with the lateral ways is that you lose your center. You become too compromised or too.
You lose your compass.
You can be someone who does 5 prayers a day and 3 hours of zikr, or you can be somebody who never remembers to do zikr and never prays. Like it's like in the middle somewhere. There's probably an optimum. Or an optimum for that person, like that works for that person. But you can be too loose and you can be too tight.
Okay, so in this idea of the problem with becoming black and white is that you become brittle, inflexible, whereas the other side is fluid, but where's the center? What's the axis around which we turn?
Mm-hmm. And where do we agree? Because if everybody's completely different, then how can we be unified?
Unified? Oh, if we're a culture or a country or something?
Yeah, as human beings, like if we don't share any values, then how can we get on with each other?
Okay, so there's a social aspect to this.
I think definitely, yeah.
Okay, probably also survival.
Yeah.
So these are different hierarchies, strata.
Yeah, I guess so, because we do, like humans have that, animal level, emotional level, social level, intellectual level, spiritual level. Like we have all these different aspects, don't we? Like I just remember these people, they wanted to live in an Islamic state because then everybody would be doing the same thing and would have the same values and the same attitudes and all that kind of stuff. It makes life, I guess, comfortable in that way that you don't have to be challenged.
Yeah, except that Afghanistan, in their setting up of the state, is not working. There's no
Well, it never
food.
worked because as soon as they got the Russians out, there was infighting, and then as soon as that stopped, the Taliban took over and was very oppressive. And then as soon as then the Americans kicked them out, and they were oppressive in a different way, and then the Taliban kicked the Americans back out again. And it's just like it doesn't seem to work because of humans, you know.
But
They don't actually practice what they preach. Those warlords, you know, were not actually that Islamic. If everybody did actually, you know, pray 5 times a day and were nice to each other all the time and, you know, followed the example of the Prophet and everything, it probably would work really nicely.
once
But
again, it's the spirit of what you're trying to do, not the letter.
Yes.
And trying to understand about what makes for radicals of, and it's not just Islam, it's every religion has its radicalizations. And I think trying to understand them just from where we are is really important because again, it's not an us or them. In reality, it's people passing through a phase, if you like, of needing to do that for this amount of time. Perhaps. It's a way to learn. So it's part of our education to go, so what if I took this on, you know, and wore this and thought these things and did everything I'm told to do?
You know, I kept thinking about while I was reading it was if she had read some of the books that I have read early on about how foundationless most of the hadith really are as you know, absolute authority. Like they're not as trustworthy as the community thinks they are. How many of the things in the Quran are reflections of earlier traditions like Zoroastrianism and Christian and Jewish and all that kind of stuff, that is obviously a syncretism of things that came before. It wasn't like, if you're looking from a historical point of view, it wasn't actually lightning from God comes from nowhere, you know, like, and all this stuff suddenly was in a book. Like it's such a simple thing to believe. If you really look at the historical context and the understanding of where all this stuff comes from, yes, it's a holy book and it's got everything, all this amazing stuff that we can learn, but you can't take it as this literal fundamentalist word of God if you understand all of that historical
Absolutely.
context.
If you don't have an understanding of where it comes from, what the source is, it will seem to be miraculous and therefore full of miracles, and the whole thing is magic.
And that's not to say it's not from Allah. It's just that Allah works in mysterious ways, and you can take all of that, you know, that was in the culture and turn it into something inspirational and magical, and that's great. But it's not. Yeah, it's hard for me to kind of reconcile those two sides of my, you know, the belief in inspiration from the Quran that I have, but also the understanding of a little bit of it. You know, come on, let's be realistic. You know, like about where all this is.
Yeah. However,
yeah,
the way I look at it sometimes is it works because of that. It works for those people who want to look at it in that respect. It's there. For those who want to look at the history of it, that's there too. And those who want to see that this is from Allah and to see it from like, wow, this has a lot of angles. It's not A or B. It's more than any alphabet. There's so many ways that it can be appreciated.
Multi-dimensional, yeah.
Yeah.
But I guess knowing that there are so many dimensions to it stops you from taking any one of those interpretations too seriously.
Yeah.
Because you could even get trapped in the Western point of view of like there's nothing real in there. It's just a whole, a cultural accretion or product of a cultural, at that point, you can miss a lot by looking at it only through that lens.
Yeah. Yeah. Each of those, any one of those is a lock that locks you out of seeing it from other points of view. But that goes for all sacred texts. They all have sources other, and they're kind of like brought in over time into this, as you call it, syncretic analog of all these different cultures. Like, just in the Bible, it's Mesopotamian, most of it from the beginning on. All the Adam and Eve and the tree and knowledge and everything, that's all from Mesopotamia and Ur and Acadia. Those are old stories already. And then
but that doesn't rule out that there's truth coming through that.
No, because that's metaphors are like that. The ones that have elements of truth in them maintain their stability and the continuance.
Could you say that something's true because it's true? Is that the criteria?
Yeah, but I think that only goes for maybe 4 or 5 things in the world. There's not a lot that I've seen
that are true. A lot of things that are true.
Yeah, and
that big T. Yeah.
Yeah, the big T. Yeah, 4 or 5 things, and that's about it. Maybe one of them might be everything that is mostly alive is mostly from the 4 proteins. That's life.
We keep getting these bits of evidence that shatter our understanding of what is true. Like, the Big Bang Theory, and then they put the James Webb Space Telescope up and it goes, well, if the Big Bang Theory is true, then these galaxies are 500 billion years older, million years older than they're supposed to be. It's like, so either what we thought we knew is not right, or there's something wrong with what we're measuring because they don't agree. And they
not only that, there's galaxies that they know are there but have disappeared because the expansion is increasing in speed.
Yeah, they're beyond our sight now.
Yeah, so people, all the astronomers and astrophysicists are going, we don't know what's happening. This is wrong. And that goes for the dark energy and dark matter too.
Could there be an essential part of maybe the quest for truth is accepting that there's not a single destination there, that it's going to keep evolving?
Yeah, or another way I like to think of it is like, you know what? Some things are just mysteries. And that's cool. That's good.
Yeah. Yes, the idea that we can even understand everything is an interesting assumption.
Yeah, in that sense.
You can't handle the truth.
And so what it does is it brings you back to like, well, what is it then? Well, what if it's just love? That the whole thing is love. This is what love looks like.
In 3D.
Yeah. Rukiah, anything you want to add?
Just thinking that love is a very simple truth. And I like how beautiful that is.
Amen.
Mm-hmm. I think sometimes that brings what I overcomplicate things.
Yeah, we're really good at complicating
we
things.
all do that.
Yeah.
Professionals.
Experts, definitely. Yeah.
Another thing about this is whatever you're looking for is what you will find. Because for some reason, that's how perception works. And that's all the way down to the quantum level. It's observation that changes the quanta.
Well, it could be that that's the whole point, isn't it? You know, that, like you're saying before, it's about discerning between true and false. And then we find out that through that process that love is the criteria for that. That when we find love, we find truth.
Yeah.
But where we find love, we find truth. And that's how we get to that ability to discern, is that, bingo, there's the love. That must be true.
And when you don't, when you keep the love out, is probably when you get, let's call
Confused.
it evil or villains or nafs or anything that is distorted because it isn't balanced.
Yeah, and you don't have that clear, like, it's funny, like, these fundamentalists, they want a clear criteria. But if you're talking about a clear foundation and criteria, like love is, that's where it goes. Like, that's what it is. It's if that's the focus, then everything else becomes clear. But if you get caught up in the form of things and make that your criteria, then you can get confused because love can slip out.
And you're
worried about the rules.
Form is part of the universe of change, and change means that you're trying to hold on to something that's just going to turn into sand. It has no, there's nothing to it. It's just changing without the understanding of matter.
Oh no, just to give you an example, like you look at the trees that look so solid and then they have termites all through them. And it's just like they're dust.
Yep, exactly. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Rahman ar-Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. Iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'in. Ihdina sirata mustaqim. Sirata ladzina an'amta alayhim. Ghayril maghdubi alayhim. Wala daalin. Ameen. Shukran for talking about stuff that's very fragile.
Yes, it's hard to. Yeah. Salaam Alaykum, everybody. Thank you.
Salam. Thanks, guys.
So, thanks again, Sheikh, for the chat this week. It was really very helpful.
Oh, good. Glad that it was. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Salaam Alaykum, murids, seekers, curious, and interested listeners. We appreciate you and are happy to share our Sufi message. Your donation will help support our Sufi Center in Sydney, where we do zikr, sohbet, spiritual counseling, and healing services. We believe the message should be free, but it costs equipment, rental, services, software, and hardware to get this to you. So thank you for choosing our podcast among all the millions available. If you go to our website, ansarisufiorder.org, you will be able to donate through PayPal whatever you think this information is worth to you. Blessings and love, the Australian Ansari Sufi Order.